My son's wedding was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became my deepest humiliation. What would you do if the very child you sacrificed everything for publicly humiliated you on one of the most important days of his life? This is the true story of an elderly father who faced betrayal at his own son's wedding and the shocking decision he made that no one saw coming. When you dedicate your entire life to family, you rarely stop to think about how the story will end. You imagine the golden years, children and grandchildren gathering around you, filling the house with laughter, recalling stories from the past, thanking you for the sacrifices you made. That's the dream most fathers carry in their hearts. But life is rarely as perfect as the picture we paint in our minds. Sometimes, the very people you love and protect the most, the ones you give your entire existence to, are the same ones who forget you when you're at your weakest. This is my story. It begins many decades ago, in a small town where life was simple but full of struggles. Back then, we didn't have the luxuries that people take for granted today. No smartphones, no constant distractions, just hard work, the land, and the people around you. I was a young man, filled with energy, ambition, and a stubborn determination to build a decent life for myself and my family. I married young. Marriage wasn't about fancy weddings or big photographs in those days. It was about commitment, about two people deciding to face life together, no matter what storms might come. Not long after our wedding, fatherhood came knocking at my door. First a boy, then a girl, then another boy. And before I knew it, I had 7 children, 7 little souls looking up at me, depending on me to guide them, feed them, and protect them from the harsh realities of life. Now, raising one child is already a challenge. Raising 7, that's a mountain most men would run from. But I didn't run. I couldn't. They were my blood, my responsibility, my reason to keep moving. Money was always tight. Time was always scarce. My days started before the sun had even risen, and they ended long after darkness had fallen. I took every job I could find, sometimes 2 or 3 at the same time, just to make sure there was food on the table and a roof over our heads. My hands grew rough, my back often ached, and sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. But in my heart, I carried a fire that never went out, the determination to give my children a better life. Their mother, my beloved wife, was my partner in all of it. She was the anchor that kept our home from drifting apart. She cooked, cleaned, comforted, and carried her share of the weight. When I stumbled, she steadied me. When I doubted, she reminded me why we were fighting so hard. But life, as it often does, threw us a storm we were never prepared for. Illness came, silent, cruel, and unforgiving. Despite everything we tried, despite prayers whispered late at night, despite holding her hand and begging her not to leave, she slipped away. And suddenly, I wasn't just a husband mourning his wife. I was a father, standing alone, holding the impossible weight of 7 grieving children. Imagine it for a moment. 7 children, all different ages, some too young to fully understand why their mother wasn't coming back. Others old enough to feel the sharp sting of loss, but not old enough to carry themselves through it. And me, the only parent left, expected to somehow be strong enough for all of them. People told me it couldn't be done. Some neighbors whispered that I should send the younger ones to relatives, or even let the state step in. It's too much for one man, they said. You can't raise 7 children on your own. But they didn't understand. These were my children, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood. How could I ever let someone else take them? How could I hand them over like they were a burden? No. If I had to sacrifice everything, my health, my time, even my own dreams, then so be it. I would raise them myself. And so began the hardest, yet most meaningful chapter of my life. There were nights when I sat alone at the kitchen table after the children were asleep, staring at bills I had no idea how to pay. My hands would tremble as I tried to stretch every coin, wondering if we'd make it to the end of the month. There were mornings when I skipped breakfast, pretending I wasn't hungry, just so there would be enough food for them. I wore the same old coat winter after winter, patching it up again and again, while my children each had something new, even if it was second-hand from a thrift store. Their shoes had soles, their shirts had buttons, and their bellies were full. That was enough for me. But you know what? I never complained. Not once. Because every smile, every laugh, every little thank you, Dad, made it worth it. Their joy was my reward. Their survival was my success. As the years passed, I watched them grow. They went to school, made friends, stumbled through childhood into teenage years, and then slowly into adulthood. They made mistakes, yes, but they also made me proud. Every report card, every graduation, every small achievement felt like a victory we had won together. I held on to one belief through it all, that one day, when they were older, they would look back and understand. They would see the sacrifices I made, the nights I went hungry, the days I worked until my body was breaking. They would honor the life I had given them. But as time went on, something unexpected happened. The bond I thought was unbreakable began to weaken. At first, it was subtle. They grew busy with their own lives, which is natural. They moved out, started families, built careers. I told myself it was a good thing. That's what a parent is supposed to want for their children, to spread their wings, to stand on their own 2 feet. But slowly, the phone calls came less often. Visits became rare. Holidays that were once filled with laughter and noise turned into quiet nights, just me and my memories. At first, I tried to ignore the ache in my chest. I told myself, everyone gets busy, everyone has responsibilities, don't take it personally. But loneliness has a way of creeping in, no matter how much you try to push it away. Still, I held on. I kept believing they would come back. I kept a drawer full of photographs, birthdays, graduations, family dinners, each picture a reminder of what once was. I would sit alone, flipping through them, replaying the memories in my mind, holding on to the warmth of the past. But nothing could prepare me for what happened next. When I finally reached retirement age, I thought maybe, just maybe, life would give me a little peace. I had worked my whole life, saved what little I could, and I dreamed of spending my final years surrounded by family, maybe even teaching my grandchildren the same lessons I once taught their parents. But instead of peace, betrayal came knocking at my door. One of my children, the very one I trusted most, convinced me to sign over my retirement benefits. They told me it was for my own good, that they would help manage the money, that I could trust them completely. And because I was a father, because I wanted to believe in them, I agreed. It didn't take long before I realized the truth. The money was gone. My years of sacrifice, the little nest egg I had managed to scrape together, vanished. And once the money was taken, so was I. The visits stopped altogether. The phone calls disappeared. And one day, without explanation, I was left at a care facility with nothing but a small bag of clothes. No goodbye. No promise to come back. Just abandonment. I still remember that first night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming silently down my face. How could this be the ending to my story? How could the children I raised with every ounce of strength abandon me when I needed them most? The days turned into weeks. I watched other residents receive visits from their families, arms full of flowers, laughter echoing down the hallways. And I sat alone, invisible. There is a pain that words can hardly describe, the pain of being forgotten by the very people you gave your life to. It is like being erased, as if all those years of sacrifice never happened. But even in those darkest moments, something inside me refused to die. Perhaps it was the same stubbornness that once kept me working 3 jobs. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was love, the kind of love a parent cannot simply switch off, no matter how deep the wound. And so I began to tell my story. It started quietly. Late at night, I would sit with a small notebook by my bedside, writing everything I remembered, my struggles, my sacrifices, my heartbreak. Page after page, I poured my soul onto paper, not because I thought anyone would read it, but because I needed to remind myself that my life mattered, that my story had weight. Little did I know, those words would one day become something greater. Because, while my children may have forgotten me, the world was about to listen. When you live in a care facility, time moves differently. The days are long, filled with routines that never change, meals at the same hours, nurses checking in, the hum of televisions playing in the common room. Yet at the same time, weeks pass in a blur, each one blending into the next, until you start to wonder if anyone even notices you're still here. I thought, perhaps my children would come eventually. Maybe they just needed time. Maybe guilt would bring them back through the doors. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, my heart jumped. Maybe it's them. Maybe today is the day. But it never was. Instead, I watched other residents welcome their families. A daughter bringing homemade soup. A son sitting for hours, playing cards with his father. Grandchildren running down the hallway, squealing with excitement. I smiled for them. But inside, each moment was a knife twisting deeper. It reminded me of what I had lost, of what I no longer had. I tried to make peace with it. I told myself I had done my duty. I had raised 7 children, given them everything. They didn't owe me anything more. But no matter how many times I repeated that to myself, my heart didn't believe it. Because what every parent truly wants isn't repayment, it's love. And when love is absent, everything else feels hollow. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of when they were small. I remembered holding tiny hands on the first day of school, running beside wobbly bicycles, cheering from the stands during soccer games. I remembered long talks about dreams, fears, and futures. I remembered tucking them in at night, promising they would never be alone. So why was I the one left alone? The silence from my children was louder than any words. Birthdays passed without calls. Holidays came and went without visits. Even the smallest gestures, a letter, a photo, a quick hello, never arrived. It was as if I had been erased from their lives. At first, anger consumed me. How dare they? After everything I had done, after every sacrifice, how could they abandon me like this? But anger only ate me alive. It didn't change anything. It didn't fill the empty chair beside my bed. So I turned to something else. I turned to storytelling. It started small. The facility offered a writing workshop, and I decided to join. The first assignment was simple. Write about your childhood. I wrote for hours, pouring out memories of running through fields barefoot, of the first time I held a fishing rod with my father, of sitting around the radio with my siblings. When I shared it aloud, people listened, really listened. One of the residents said, "You should record these. Your children may not be here now, but one day they'll wish they had your stories." The idea stuck. That night, I borrowed an old recorder from the staff and began to speak into it. I didn't plan or rehearse. I simply talked, as if my children were sitting across from me. I told them about my life, my struggles, my dreams. I told them about their mother, about the love we once shared, about how much we wanted them before they were even born. And something strange happened. For the first time in years, I felt less alone. Even if they weren't listening yet, my voice was reaching into the silence. A volunteer at the facility later suggested, "Why don't you share these online? There's a whole niche for family stories, for wisdom from elders." People would listen. I laughed at first. Who would want to hear an old man rambling about his past? But she insisted. She showed me how to upload recordings to a platform. She helped me create a simple channel, nothing fancy. We called it Elderly Wisdom. And slowly, people started listening. At first, just a handful of strangers, then dozens, then hundreds. Comments began to appear. Your story reminds me of my father. Thank you for sharing this. It makes me want to call my parents. You made me cry, but in a good way. The words of strangers began to heal wounds my children had left open. For the first time, I felt seen again. But even with new listeners, there was still a hole in my heart, because no matter how many strangers cared, it wasn't the same as hearing from my own children. I longed for their voices, their forgiveness, their love. And yet, as the weeks passed, I began to realize something. Maybe the purpose of my pain wasn't just about me and my children. Maybe my story could serve a bigger purpose. Maybe the reason I was still here was to remind others not to make the same mistakes. So I leaned into it. I spoke openly about abandonment, about the ache of being forgotten, about the dangers of pride and resentment. I urged listeners to reach out to their parents, to mend broken relationships before it was too late. Don't wait until you're standing at a grave, I told them. Love your family now while you still can. As the losi inozisha, the losi inozisha, in the losi inos, the losi inosi inosi inosi. And slowly, my words rippled out into the world. People began sharing my videos. Some wrote to me, telling me they had reconciled with parents after years of silence. Others said they had forgiven children who had wronged them, and with each message I realized my voice was no longer just mine, it was part of something greater. Yet even as I inspired strangers, I still held on to one quiet hope, that someday, somehow, my own children would hear my voice too, that my words, carried through the vastness of the internet, would reach them, that they would remember me not as the man they abandoned, but as the father who had loved them more than life itself. And little did I know, that day was coming sooner than I thought. It is strange how words can travel further than footsteps. My children would not come through the door of my room, but my voice carried through recordings and uploaded online was finding its way into homes across the world. What began as a way to fight my own loneliness slowly grew into something that touched thousands of strangers. At first, I couldn't believe it. One evening, the volunteer who helped me set up the channel walked in with a laptop. "Look at this," she said, placing it on the small table by my bed. The screen showed dozens of comments under my latest video. "Your story made me cry. I called my dad tonight after years of silence. I wish my grandfather was still alive to tell me things like this. Thank you for sharing. You remind me so much of my own father. Please keep posting." I scrolled slowly, my eyes blurring with tears. Strangers were listening, strangers were caring. I wasn't invisible anymore. The channel grew because it filled a niche people didn't know they were missing. In a world where content is often fast, loud, and fleeting, my voice offered something different. Slow, steady reflections about life, family, sacrifice, forgiveness. People craved it because deep down, everyone longs for connection, especially the kind that comes from an elder who has lived through storms and survived. Soon, my videos were being shared on forums, family groups, even church pages. I was invited to record special messages for holidays, like Father's Day and Thanksgiving, where I spoke about gratitude and love. Viewers began calling me Grandpa Thomas, though that wasn't my real name. It became my online identity, a father figure to thousands who needed one. But as the channel grew, something inside me shifted. I no longer felt like I was only talking to strangers. I was also, in some way, still talking to my children. Every video became a letter to them, even if they never saw it. I would look into the camera and say things like, "No matter how far you go, a parent never stops loving you," or "It's never too late to come home." And though I was speaking to the world, in my heart, I was speaking to 7 faces I hadn't seen in years. One night, after posting a video about forgiveness, I received a message that stopped me cold. It wasn't from a stranger, it was from one of my daughters. "Dad," the message began, "I saw your video. I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry. I don't know if you'll forgive me, but I want to see you." I read it over and over, hardly believing it was real. My hands shook. Tears spilled down my cheeks. The silence was breaking. The next morning, she came. I remember the moment vividly. I was sitting in the common room when the door opened, and there she was, older than the last time I saw her, but still my little girl in my eyes. She walked slowly, nervously, as if unsure whether she belonged, and I stood, weak legs trembling, but heart racing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, 2 souls with years of pain between them. Then she whispered, "Dad." That one word shattered everything. I opened my arms, and she ran into them. We clung to each other, sobbing, as if time itself was melting away. She told me she had seen my videos online. A friend had shared them with her, not even realizing it was her father. She recognized my voice immediately. "I couldn't believe it," she said. "I thought I had lost you, Dad. I thought I had ruined everything." I cupped her face in my hands. "You could never lose me. I was always here, waiting." We spent hours talking, catching up on years we had missed. She told me about her family, her children, my grandchildren. She told me about her regrets, her guilt, her fear that it was too late. And I told her it was never too late. That visit lit a spark. Within weeks, word spread through the family that I was telling my story online. Curiosity led to one visit, then another. Slowly, my children began to return. First one daughter, then a son, then another. They came with hesitant smiles and tearful apologies. Some came alone, others brought my grandchildren. The first time I met my grandchildren, my heart nearly burst. Little ones with bright eyes and innocent smiles ran into my arms, hugging me as if they had always known me. "Grandpa," they shouted, though they had never met me before. And I thought to myself, this is grace. This is what it feels like when love gets a second chance. But not all of my children returned so quickly. Some still held on to resentment, pride, or shame. Some stayed silent, watching from a distance. And yet, I refused to give up, because if my voice could reach strangers across the globe, I believed it could also reach the hearts of my own children. So, I kept recording. I kept telling stories not just about pain, but about hope, redemption, and the power of family. I shared lessons about mistakes, about forgiveness, about the importance of reaching out before it's too late. One video I recorded ended with these words: "If you are listening, my children, know this. I forgive you. I never stopped loving you. And my arms will always be open if you ever choose to walk back through the door." I didn't know if they heard it, but I spoke it anyway. Because sometimes love is not about guarantees, it's about faith. And though my heart had been broken, my faith in love was still alive. When one child came back into my life, the silence of the others grew even louder. It was as if their absence echoed in the room, filling every quiet moment with unanswered questions. My daughter's visit had been like sunlight breaking through a storm cloud, but behind that light, shadows still remained. I had 7 children, only one had come. Every evening, after she left, I would sit in my room and think about each of them. I remembered the nights I stayed awake when they were babies, cradling them in my arms while the rest of the world slept. I remembered the scraped knees I bandaged, the school plays I clapped for, the birthdays I worked extra hours just to afford a small cake. Each memory was a thread, weaving together a picture of my love for them. But the picture now felt torn, pieces missing where their faces should be. One afternoon, while recording a video, I paused mid-sentence. My throat tightened and my eyes watered. I stared into the camera and whispered, "I wonder if my children know I still wait for them. I wonder if they know that no mistake, no silence, can erase the bond between us." Were the cases like again to see when I uploaded that video? The comments poured in. "They will come, don't lose hope. Your children are missing out on the greatest blessing you." Sometimes love takes the longest road back home, but it always finds a way. Strangers carried my pain with me. Strangers carried my hope. In some ways, their encouragement gave me strength to hold on. But deep down, nothing could replace the sound of my own children's voices. Weeks passed. My daughter visited often, bringing her kids. Those visits filled my heart with joy I thought I had lost forever. We would sit in the small garden outside the facility, the children running in circles, while she and I talked. She confessed that coming to see me had taken courage. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid you wouldn't forgive me. Afraid I had waited too long." I told her the truth. "You were never too late. You came at the right time, the moment your heart was ready." Yet, even as I said those words, I longed for the same moment with my other children. Then something unexpected happened. A man walked into the facility one Sunday morning. At first, I didn't recognize him. His hair was grayer, his shoulders broader, but then I saw his eyes, and my breath caught. It was my eldest son. He stood in the doorway, hesitant, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Hi, Dad," he muttered, almost awkwardly, as if the word Dad felt foreign on his tongue. I rose from my chair slowly, my heart pounding. "Son," I whispered. That was all I could manage. We stood facing each other, two men separated by years of silence. He was no longer the boy who used to beg me to throw a baseball in the backyard. He was a grown man, hardened by life. But I saw him, the child I had raised, hidden beneath the layers of time. Finally, he broke the silence. "I saw your video," he said. "The one where you said your arms are always open. I wasn't sure if you meant it." I felt tears sting my eyes. I meant every word. "To the moerven, passes rejaden, come be tabi, bad the slouden." He stepped forward then, slowly, until we were standing just inches apart, and for the first time in decades, I pulled him into my arms. He resisted for a moment, his body stiff, but then he let go. His head dropped onto my shoulder, and he wept like a child. We sat together for hours. He told me about his struggles, his failures, his bitterness. He admitted he had been angry at me, angry that life had been hard, that he felt I hadn't given him enough. I listened without judgment, because that is what fathers do. And when he finished, I told him the truth. "I may not have given you everything, son, but I gave you all I had. Every breath, every ounce of strength, every sacrifice, it was all for you." His tears flowed again, and this time he held my hand. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. Healing doesn't always come in waves. Sometimes it comes in drops, one child at a time, one conversation at a time, one hug at a time. But I also knew there were still 5 children out there, silent, distant, perhaps even unaware of how desperately I waited. The silence weighed heavily on me, but my faith was stronger than my sorrow. I kept recording. I kept sharing, and with every word, I held on to the hope that one day, the silence would break again. Because if my story had taught me anything, it was this: love, no matter how buried, has a way of rising. The days after my eldest son's visit felt like a dream I didn't want to wake from. For years, I had lived in silence, abandoned by the very ones I had sacrificed everything for. Then suddenly, 2 of my 7 children had returned, their voices and laughter filling spaces I thought would remain empty forever. It was as if a heavy stone had been lifted off my chest, but with joy came an H. Because with every moment of healing, I was reminded of the ones who were still missing. 5 children, 5 pieces of my heart still out there in the world, carrying wounds and misunderstandings that kept them from me. The internet had become the bridge between us. Through my videos, my words reached them, even if they pretended not to watch. I spoke as though they were sitting across from me. To my children, if you're listening, know this: I am not angry. I am not bitter. Life is too short for bitterness. I am only waiting, and I will wait until my last breath, if that's what it takes. I didn't know if those words pierced through their walls, but I believed in the power of persistence, in the way truth could eventually soften even the hardest of hearts. Weeks later, another knock came at my door. This time it wasn't hesitant or slow, it was firm, almost urgent. When I opened it, my second son stood there. He looked tired, his clothes worn, his eyes filled with both defiance and sorrow. "Dad," he said, his voice rough, "I don't know why I'm here. Maybe because I couldn't sleep. Maybe because I heard your voice online, and it wouldn't leave my head." I stepped aside without a word, letting him in. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he paced the small room, his fists clenching and unclenching. "I was angry at you for a long time," he said finally. "I thought you favored others. I thought you didn't understand me. When Mom left, I blamed you. And when you struggled, I hated you for being weak." The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. He needed to speak them, and I needed to hear them. I sat quietly, my eyes on him. When he finally sank into the chair across from me, his face crumbled. "But then, I saw your videos, and I realized you were never weak. You were carrying all of us on your shoulders, and I left you when you needed me most." My throat tightened. "Son," I whispered, "I never needed you to carry me. I only ever wanted to see you stand tall, even if it meant I had to fall." Tears filled his eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I reached across the table, placing my trembling hand over his. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something I give freely, because you are my son." We sat there, hands clasped, and in that silence, years of anger dissolved. Soon after, he too began visiting regularly. He brought his children, introducing me to more grandchildren I had never known. Each time they hugged me, I felt pieces of my broken heart stitching back together. The facility staff noticed the change in me. I smiled more. I ate better. I even started joining group activities again. Hope has a way of reviving not just the spirit, but the body too. But not all the news was joyful. One evening, a staff member came into my room with a letter. "This was dropped off for you," she said softly. I opened it with trembling hands. It was from one of my other daughters, the one who had been the most distant, the most bitter. The letter was short, almost cold. "Dad, I don't know what you expect from us. We all suffered too. Maybe you should stop dredging up the past. Some things are better left buried." I sat for a long time, the letter shaking in my hands. Her words were sharp, but beneath them, I sensed pain. She wasn't ready to face me. Her wounds were still open. That night, I recorded another video. I didn't mention her name, but I spoke with her in mind. Sometimes, forgiveness feels like reopening an old wound, but unless we clean the wound, it never heals. My arms remain open, even for those who are not ready to step into them yet. The comments poured in again, from strangers who resonated with my words. Some shared their own stories of estrangement. Others thanked me for giving them courage to call their parents. I realized then that even if some of my children never returned, my pain was not wasted. It was being transformed into hope for others. My suffering had become a lifeline for countless families across the world. But deep inside, the longing never faded. I still wanted all 7 of my children by my side. I still prayed every night for the silence to break once more. Because a father's heart never stops reaching. Even when rejected, even when ignored, it keeps stretching, hoping, waiting. And though some doors had opened, others remained locked. I knew the journey was far from over. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. After reconnecting with 2 of my sons and 1 daughter, I felt like I had been given a second chance at fatherhood. Yet, The H for the others never left me. 5 children still carried silence in their hearts, and the weight of that silence pressed down on me every night as I lay in my narrow bed. I prayed daily, not just the kind of prayer that asks for something, but the kind that pours out from the depths of a weary soul. Lord, let me see my children again before you call me home, I whispered each evening. Then, one morning, something extraordinary happened. It was a Saturday, and the facility had organized a family day. There was food, music, and a few games for the grandchildren, who often came with visiting families. I sat on a bench near the garden, watching balloons sway in the breeze, when the front gates opened. My breath caught. Walking through those gates were not 1, not 2, but 4 of my remaining children. For a moment, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I blinked hard, my heart racing. They walked together, hesitant but united, their eyes scanning the courtyard until they landed on me. Time seemed to freeze. My hands trembled as I tried to stand. Tears blurred my vision. My voice cracked as I whispered, "My children." They approached slowly, almost cautiously, as if unsure how I would react. The eldest among them, my daughter who had written me the cold letter, stepped forward first. Her face was stiff, but her eyes gave her away. There was pain, fear, and a glimmer of longing. I opened my arms. "You are home," I said simply. That was all it took. She broke down, rushing into my embrace, sobbing uncontrollably. The others followed, and suddenly I was surrounded, my arms full of the children I had dreamed of holding again for so long. The staff and other families looked on, some crying, some clapping, but in that moment, the world disappeared. It was just us, the father who had been forgotten, and the children who had finally returned. We sat together for hours. At first, the conversation was awkward. They apologized, stumbled over their words, and tried to explain their absence. Some blamed hardships, others blamed fear or shame. One admitted they avoided me because facing me meant facing their own failures. I listened to it all without judgment. I only said one thing: I forgave you before you even asked. Slowly, the tension melted away. We laughed at old stories, shared updates about their lives, and even joked about how many grandchildren I had to meet now. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. That night, my room overflowed with voices and laughter. Grandchildren played on the floor, daughters helped serve food, sons sat at my bedside, asking about my health. For the first time in decades, my family was whole again. One of my grandsons climbed onto my lap and asked, "Grandpa, why are you crying if you're happy?" I smiled through my tears. Because sometimes happiness is so big, it has to spill out. Very gone redince too. Into go do. The days that followed were like a dream. My children began visiting regularly, sometimes all together, sometimes in pairs. They helped fix my old room, brought me clothes, and even took me out for meals. The staff said they had never seen me so alive. But beyond the joy, there was something deeper happening. My story, once just a tale of abandonment, had become a testimony of reconciliation. My YouTube channel, which had connected me with strangers, was now the very thing that reconnected me with my family. In one video, I spoke directly from the heart. I thought my story would end in loneliness. But love found me again. If you are estranged from someone you love, take the first step back. Pride may keep you apart, but forgiveness will bring you home. That video went viral, reaching millions. Families across the world wrote to me, sharing how they had called their parents, reconciled with siblings, or chosen forgiveness after years of bitterness. My pain had become a bridge not just for my family, but for countless others. And yet, deep inside, I knew the greatest miracle wasn't the online fame or the viral videos. The greatest miracle was sitting in that garden on Family Day, when the gates opened and my children walked back into my life. Because in that moment, I learned something I will never forget. It is never too late for love to return. As the weeks turned into months, my life felt almost unrecognizable compared to the years of isolation I had endured. Where there had once been silence, now there was conversation. Where there had once been loneliness, now there was laughter. My children, once scattered and distant, were slowly weaving themselves back into my days. One visit, one shared meal, one tearful embrace at a time. The transformation was not just in them, it was in me too. I carried myself differently. The bitterness that once gnawed at my heart had softened into gratitude. I no longer woke up asking, "Why did they forget me?" Instead, I whispered, "Thank you for bringing them back." And yet, reconciliation is never as simple as a single hug or a single conversation. Healing takes time, and forgiveness, though freely given, must still be lived out day by day. One evening, I sat with 3 of my children around my bed. We were sipping tea, the grandchildren asleep in the next room. My daughter, the one who had once written me the cold letter, looked down at her hands nervously. "Dad," she began, "I don't know how to undo the years I wasn't here. I don't know how to make it right." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't need to undo the past. You only need to live the present with love. That's all any of us can do." She cried softly, and my sons nodded in agreement. It was in that moment that I realized something powerful. Reconciliation isn't about erasing mistakes, it's about choosing love despite them. My channel became the mirror of that truth. More than ever, I spoke about forgiveness, second chances, and the beauty of rebuilding broken bridges. People began to call my content a healing niche. Messages poured in daily. "I showed your video to my estranged mother, and we're talking again. Your story gave me courage to call my dad after 20 years. You don't just share your life, you give us hope." It humbled me deeply. What I had once considered the darkest season of my life had become a lantern for others, walking through their own darkness. But even as the world celebrated my story, I was still walking a delicate road with my children. Not all wounds healed instantly. Sometimes small arguments surfaced, old resentments resurfaced, and misunderstandings reappeared. There were moments when my sons disagreed fiercely, or when one of my daughters withdrew in silence after a family gathering. But this time, we didn't let the distance grow. We talked, we apologized, we reminded one another of the years we had already lost and how we refused to lose any more. One of the most profound lessons I learned through this journey was that family is not perfect. Love does not erase conflict. Instead, true love endures through conflict. It chooses unity even when disagreement lingers. I remember telling my grandchildren one afternoon, as they sat cross-legged around me, "Do you know what makes a family strong?" They shook their heads eagerly. "Not the times we all get along, but the times we fight and still come back to each other. That's when love proves itself real." Their young eyes widened with understanding, and one of them whispered, "So even if we argue, you'll always love us." I smiled, pulling them close. "Always. Nothing can change that." He said, might. That became my message not just to them, but to the thousands watching online, and most importantly, to my own children. Love doesn't wait for perfection. Love chooses presence. Love chooses forgiveness. Love chooses to stay. And as my days grew shorter and my body weaker, I found peace in knowing that I had lived long enough to see that truth bloom again in my own family. Time, once my enemy, had become my most precious companion. I no longer dreaded the ticking of the clock or the setting of the sun. Instead, I cherished every second, because each moment was now painted with the voices of my children and the laughter of my grandchildren. When I first arrived at the care facility, I believed my story was nearing its end. I was a forgotten old man, left to fade quietly into the background of life. But now, every day felt like a new chapter, rich with color, sound, and meaning. One Sunday afternoon, As the whole family gathered in the garden, I looked around and felt overwhelmed. Children ran between the trees, my sons argued over the best way to grill meat, and my daughters sat together, catching up like friends who had never been apart. I sat back in my chair, tears welling in my eyes. This, I whispered to myself, is the miracle I prayed for. But miracles are not given just to be kept, they are given to be shared. I realized that my story wasn't simply about an old man abandoned and then rediscovered. It was about the power of forgiveness, the resilience of family, and the truth that love, though wounded, can heal and flourish again. And so I began to shape my channel not just as a diary of my pain, but as a blueprint of hope for others. I recorded lessons I had learned through my trials, messages I wanted my grandchildren and even strangers to carry long after I was gone. I told them, money fades, but love remains. Pride destroys, but forgiveness restores. Time is not guaranteed, so use it to love, not to hate. These videos resonated deeply. Parents wrote to me saying they finally reconciled with their children, estranged siblings reunited after decades, families torn apart by anger began rebuilding. My life, once a symbol of sorrow, had become a symbol of restoration. But beyond the online world, the greatest joy was simply in the everyday moments with my family. One evening, my eldest son helped me walk through the park near the facility. We moved slowly, my hand gripping his arm for support. As we paused to rest on a bench, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Dad," he said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on me, on us." I smiled, my voice soft. A father never gives up. Even when it hurts, even when it seems hopeless, we keep waiting, because love waits. His tears fell, and in that moment I knew the years of pain were worth this single sentence of truth between us. My grandchildren, too, became a source of light. They asked me to tell them stories of my youth, to share lessons about hard work, love, and faith. They even begged to appear in my videos, waving at the camera and shouting, "Don't forget to love your family." Sometimes I wondered how different life might have been if my children had never left me, if we had never walked through the valley of separation. But then I realized, without the pain, we might never have learned the depth of forgiveness. Without the distance, we might never have discovered the beauty of reunion. My suffering had become the soil from which something far greater grew, a legacy of love that would outlive me. I no longer feared death. Instead, I prepared for it with peace, knowing that when my time came, I would leave behind not just memories, but a story that would inspire generations. And as I looked around the garden that day, watching my children laugh together, I whispered another prayer. "Thank you for giving me back my family. Thank you for letting me see the fruit of forgiveness before I go." Because, in the end, the true measure of a man's life is not what he accumulates, but what he gives. And I had given my children the greatest gift. I had love that never quit. The older I grew, the more fragile my body became. Simple tasks like walking across the room or lifting a cup of tea began to feel like climbing a mountain. The nurses at the facility noticed my slowing pace. The doctors spoke more gently, and my children began hovering around me with worried eyes. I knew what was coming. My time was drawing near, but unlike before, I no longer feared it. Once, I thought death would come for me in silence, in loneliness, in the shadow of abandonment. Now, I felt surrounded by love, laughter, and the voices of those I had thought were lost forever. One evening, I gathered my children around me. All 7 were there, a miracle I still struggled to fully believe. We sat in the quiet of my room, the grandchildren asleep down the hall, and I asked them to listen. "My children," I said, my voice weak but steady, "I don't know how many more days the Lord will give me. But I do know this: I am at peace. You have given me back what I thought I had lost. You have given me more than money, more than comfort. You gave me yourselves. Tears filled their eyes. My eldest daughter reached for my hand. "Dad, we should have come sooner. We wasted so much time." I shook my head. "No, you came when you were ready, and that is enough." Dat tutu sound, gudu a the LDL, CRE, dandand. I looked at each of them in turn. "Promise me one thing. Promise me you won't let pride or anger separate you again. Promise me you will love each other, even when it's hard. That is all I ask." One by one, they nodded. Some whispered, "I promise." Others simply wept. But I knew in my heart they understood. As the days went on, my health declined. I spent more time in bed, less time in the garden. But my children filled the room with life. They brought photos, stories, and even music. My grandchildren would climb onto the bed, snuggling beside me as if trying to keep me tethered to this world. I recorded a few final videos, shorter than before, my voice weaker but still filled with conviction. In one of them, I said, "To anyone listening, remember this family is worth the fight. Don't let time steal your chance to say I love you. Don't wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised." That video reached millions. It was shared at churches, schools, and family gatherings. People wrote to me saying they reconciled with loved ones after watching it. Knowing my words were making a difference gave me peace. One night, as I drifted in and out of sleep, I felt a small hand slip into mine. It was one of my granddaughters. She whispered, "Grandpa, don't be afraid. We'll be okay. He's even noted it can sected potted." Her words touched me deeply. I realized then that my story was no longer mine alone. It belonged to them, to my children, my grandchildren, and to every soul who had listened, learned, and chosen love because of it. When my final day came, I wasn't alone. My children were gathered around me, their hands holding mine, their voices whispering prayers and goodbyes. I closed my eyes, not with sorrow, but with gratitude, because, though my journey had been marked with pain, it ended in peace. Though I had been abandoned, I was found again. Though I had been forgotten, I was remembered in love, and that is the greatest gift a father could ever hope for. Life is a story, and every story has chapters, some filled with joy, some filled with pain, and others that are so quiet you wonder if they even matter. But in the end, when you look back, you realize every page mattered. Every decision, every tear, every sacrifice, and even every silence built the person you became. As I lay here in this bed, the light from the window casting soft shadows on the wall, I feel that my story has finally reached its last chapter. My body is weak now, my voice trembles when I speak, and my days are slower, but my heart is at peace. Peace is something I thought I would never have again. I think back to the earliest days, when I was a young man full of energy and ambition. Back then, I believed life would always be kind if I worked hard. I believed that raising children would guarantee love in return. I believed that sacrifice would always be rewarded. But life taught me that love does not follow simple rules. People change, circumstances change, hearts wander, and sometimes the very people you give everything to will forget you, at least for a while. When I first entered the care facility, abandoned and broken, I thought my story had already ended. My children had taken my retirement benefits, left me behind, and moved on. I felt like a tree cut at the roots, still standing but without life. I thought those years of sacrifice had vanished into nothing, but I was wrong. Because even when we feel forgotten, love still lingers. The seeds of love, once planted, never truly die. They may stay buried under anger, pride, or neglect, but in time they sprout again. And that's what happened with me and my children. The day they walked back into my life, everything changed. At first I doubted it. I thought it was guilt. I thought maybe they just wanted closure. But slowly, I realized they came back not because of obligation, but because love still lived inside them. And that love healed me. I cannot describe to you the feeling of seeing your child's face again after years of silence. The way their voice, even grown and weary, still sounds like the little boy or girl you once carried in your arms. The way their eyes soften when they look at you, as if they, too, are remembering the bedtime stories, the home-cooked meals, the sacrifices they had once taken for granted. It is a miracle, one that I will never stop thanking God for. Now, as I prepare for the end of my journey, I don't want to leave this world with regret. I want to leave it with lessons. Lessons for my children, for my grandchildren, and for anyone watching or listening to my story. The first lesson is this: time is the most precious gift you can give. Money fades, possessions break, even health will fail one day. But time, the hours you spend sitting with your loved ones, the minutes you take to say, "I love you," the seconds you choose to forgive instead of holding a grudge, those are priceless. If you are watching this, ask yourself, when was the last time you gave your time to the people who matter most? When was the last time you called your parents, visited your grandparents, or told your children that you are proud of them? Don't wait. Don't put it off until tomorrow, because tomorrow is not promised. The second lesson is this: forgiveness is not weakness. For years, I carried bitterness toward my children. I told myself I would never forgive them for abandoning me. I told myself they did not deserve it. But that bitterness poisoned me. It kept me chained to pain, even when I wanted to be free. The moment I forgave them, everything changed. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it allowed us to build a future. Forgiveness opened the door for healing, and in forgiving, I found peace. Maybe there is someone in your life you need to forgive. A parent, a sibling, a friend. Don't hold on to anger so tightly that you miss the chance for reconciliation. Life is too short, and love is too important. The third lesson is this: family is not perfect, but it is worth fighting for. We hurt each other. We disappoint each other. Sometimes we even walk away. But deep down, we belong to each other. No amount of mistakes can erase that bond. Family is where we learn patience, where we practice sacrifice, and where we discover the deepest forms of love. Don't give up on your family, even if they hurt you, even if they seem lost. Keep a small light of hope alive. You never know when that light will guide them back. I shared these lessons with my children in our last family gathering. We sat in my room, the grandchildren asleep down the hall, and I told them, "Promise me you won't let pride divide you again. Promise me you will be there for each other when life gets hard. Promise me you won't wait until someone is gone to realize how much they mattered." They all nodded, some through tears, some through silence, but I could see the promise in their eyes. As my health declined further, I spent more time reflecting. Sometimes I would close my eyes and imagine walking again through the old house, hearing the laughter of children echoing down the hallway. Sometimes I would remember the nights of hunger, when I went without food so my kids could eat. And sometimes I would remember the loneliness of the care facility, the cold feeling of being forgotten. But strangely, I no longer feel bitterness when I think of those times. Instead, I feel gratitude. Gratitude because every part of the story, both the joy and the sorrow, brought me here. And here is a place of peace. One night, my granddaughter held my hand and whispered, "Grandpa, don't be afraid. We'll be okay." In that moment, I realized my story was no longer mine alone. It belonged to them now. My children, my grandchildren, the generations that would come after me. My story would live on in their choices, in their love, in their forgiveness. And perhaps through this video, my story will live on in you too. So let me say this one last time. From the depth of my heart, love while you can, forgive while you can. Cherish your family while you can. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't let pride or anger steal years that could be filled with laughter and love. Because in the end, all the money, success, and possessions in the world mean nothing if you don't have someone to share them with. When I close my eyes for the last time, I won't be thinking of the money I lost. I won't be thinking of the betrayals, the abandonment, or the pain. I will be thinking of the faces of my children gathered around me. I will be thinking of the tiny hands of my grandchildren. I will be thinking of the laughter, the tears, the forgiveness, and the love that came full circle. And that, my friends, is enough. This is my legacy, not wealth, not fame, not property. My legacy is the story of a father who gave everything, who suffered deeply, but who ended his journey surrounded by love. If my story has touched your heart, let it move you to action. Call your parents, hug your children, heal the wounds in your family. Start today, because love is the only treasure worth leaving behind. I leave this world not in sorrow, but in gratitude. My circle is complete, my journey is done, and I know that love, the love I gave, and the love I received, will live on long after I am gone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting it touch your heart, and may you, too, find peace in the embrace of family.